All right, so what we're talking about today is the STO norms database from Hard Dollar. So we're going to go through kind of an introduction on what this STO norms database is, who it's targeted for, who's going to benefit from it, and then we'll do a live demonstration of how it can be used in the context of an actual STO project. So at the heart of the matter, what does it do? So the whole purpose of this STO norms database, STO being shutdown, turnaround, and outage, the whole purpose of this norms database is to really answer the question, how many man hours does it take to do something? And so if you think about the number of tasks and operations in a typical shutdown or turnaround project for a plant, it could number into the thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands. Okay, so somebody has to figure out in order to produce a budget, for each one of those tasks, how many man hours is it going to take? What kind of man hours? What types of crafts are going to be involved in each one of those thousands of operations or activities? And so this norms database is intended to answer those questions. Okay, so who's going to benefit from using this? It's primarily directed at owners, engineers, contractors, construction managers, really anybody that's involved in estimating and budgeting for plant projects, and primarily for maintenance, shutdown, turnaround type projects. Okay, you could use this on capital projects as well. There's some applicability to new construction of plants or expansions, but the primary audience for this is the folks that are doing shutdowns and turnarounds. So what are the benefits of this STO norms database? I guess first and foremost, it's going to speed up the estimating process. So as we're putting budgets together, as you can imagine, for thousands of line items, having a database that's already defined, already organized, that can pull those man hours in, pull in those standard assemblies, is going to speed up the estimating cycle and budgeting cycle, regardless of what stage the project is, whether it's early stage, conceptual, into the defined stage, into the execution stage. Those man-hour norms and having those at your disposal is going to speed things up significantly. Another main benefit is just having this massive database of norms already set up. Most folks, if you've been in the industry for a while, you're going to have some of this knowledge already, but oftentimes it's not organized, it's not categorized, it's not really set up in a way that can be leveraged during the estimating process, right? The values and the norms might be often in an Excel spreadsheet or multiple spreadsheets. Sometimes they're in a database or multiple databases. In this case, with the STO norms database, it's ready to go out of the box. It's already set up. Everything's categorized, labeled. And that also drives the next one, which is ensuring consistency. So this ensures that, hey, if we're doing a particular task on a plant, we're using the same baseline assumptions. If that plant is in a certain part of the world, that we're going to use the same man hours per unit assumption on project 1 as we are on project 2, as long as those projects are in the same geographic area. Okay? Doesn't mean we can't change them on a job-by-job basis, but at least we've got a reference point to start from. Okay? And then lastly, driving accuracy and confidence. This STO norms database, whether you're going to use it as an original source of data or whether you're going to use it as a validation for your own estimating judgment, right? We can use this STO norms database in either of those kind of applications, and in both cases, we're going to help you improve your accuracy and ultimately your confidence in the numbers. Right? The various parties involved in the project, whether you're owner, contractor, subcontractor, we can use this STO norms database as kind of a common language, if you will, a common understanding of how long should a certain task take. There's 3 components to this STO norms database, and we're going to walk through each one of these, and then we'll show them as we go. Okay, so the norms database is a SQL database, and that's where the actual norms exist. And there's 30,000, roughly 30,000 norms in that database. Second component is what we call the norms manager, and that's a web-based tool that allows you to go and customize those norms outside of $. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go here. And then lastly, and probably the most important piece, is the norms browser, and that's the part that basically provides access to that norms data from inside of your $. estimates. Okay, so we can create an estimate in $. by pulling items and norms out of that database into the estimate in $. Okay, so let's expand on each one of those. Norms database itself, as we talked about, 30,000 plus norms in there. And when we talk about a norm, what we're talking about is the combination of something that various factors that create a distinct operation. Right? So you'll see as we get into it that a norm is going to be relevant to a particular piece of equipment, whether it's a heater, an exchanger, a vessel, right? Whatever it is, that's the equipment. And then you're going to have other distinguishing characteristics. What's the size of it? What are we doing? Different tasks. So as we look at, we think of a norm, it's the various combinations of all those things. And there's about 30,000 of them. This also comes with primary assemblies and support assemblies. So we have for each norm, so let's say we're pressure washing a vessel, right? We know what assembly, what types of labor resources are typically going to be used to do that. So not only do we know the total man hours that we should expect, but we also know what kind of labor is typically going to be involved in that particular task. Okay. And that's the primary assembly. We also have a support assembly. We've separated those out because they're kind of, the support assembly is really optional. You may want that, you may not, depending on, if we're really in a crunch and we're trying to speed it up, then maybe we add in that support assembly, put more hands on the task. But those you'll find as we get into it, you'll see those are optional. So the norms themselves were developed by EPCM, by the way. Information about EPCM is on their website, but EPCM has really their core competency is in the plant and process space, and really, as we say here, they're process industry experts, and they've done a lot of work with all the major oil and gas companies, power and energy companies, even manufacturing and chemical and pharmaceutical companies. Basically anybody that if you own a major plant, you've probably worked with EPCM. And so from that expertise as well as time and motion studies, that's where these man-hour norms were developed. Okay? And as we talked about, those norms are organized and searchable based on what equipment are we working on, what's the discipline that we are engaged in, and then other parameters like pressure ratings and sizes and diameters and various things like that. Okay, the norms manager gives us the ability to go into those norms and maintain them and even add new ones outside of $. So if there is a role in the organization where that role is responsible for keeping those norms current and applying perhaps factors based on location or difficulty, all of that information can be maintained in the norms database through this web browser. So let's take a look at what that browser looks like. And I've got it open here. So this is my login to my norms browser, and you can see I'm just accessing this through Internet Explorer. I don't have to have any kind of software installed in order to just manage the norms. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. And what we're going to get here is an interface, a browser-based interface that allows us to go in and look at the norms, modify them, and this gives us a good idea of how these norms are organized. Okay, we can see, in this view here, we're looking at the norms. The tree over on the left allows you to really go in and define things that make up the norms? What are the units of measure we deal with? What are the pressure ratings, dimensions, components, etc.? Okay, so here we're looking at the norms themselves. So again, if we were to go all the way through this list, you see the first 15 norms here out of 30,000. Okay, so as we look at these things, you know, a norm number 1, for example, is a combination of what trade is it, what equipment is it, what component is it, and then all these different dimensions, et cetera. Okay, and the norm in this case is 0.99. That's man-hours per unit. Okay, so then the question is, well, what do all these things mean? What's equipment 001? If I go into my equipment list, now we're going to see this is just a relational database. Okay, so this is equipment code 001 is a heat exchanger. 004 is a vessel, et cetera. Okay, and what this manager allows you to do is, if you don't want to call it what we've called it, you can go in and edit any of these descriptions. And so if you want to call these things something different than what we're calling them, you're certainly able to do that. Okay, and that's true of the equipment. That's true of all of these other factors, whether it's dimensions. If you want to get finer granularity on these dimensions and add a norm that's maybe in between those two sizes, you're welcome to do that. Any of these values in here, again, you can edit them, and you can also add new ones. Okay, so we can come up here and add a new component. We could add a new piece of equipment that we have in our plants, maybe that's not included in this norms database. Okay, so this is an open, living, breathing database that you can go in and make it your own. Okay, so you can start with what we have. But remember, there's 30,000 plus norms in here, so an individual customer may only need, 5,000 or 10,000. You can go in and delete all the other stuff that you don't need. Okay, just take out the clutter. Okay, you can also import data into this. So if you have a spreadsheet maybe with a bunch of norms already defined in it, then we can use that import capability to get your data into this format as quickly as possible. One thing I want to point out here is location factors and difficulty factors. So this is something where you're definitely, individual customers are going to want to customize these values. So you can see we start off with 3 different location factors, but you can make these factors, if you work in 20 different places, you're going to want to come in here and add 20 different location factors and apply the appropriate factors off of the baseline. Okay, so if you work in an area where the productivity is less than our baseline, then you would have a factor here that's higher, more man-hours per unit. Okay, and you can certainly add new ones there. Okay, let's go back to the presentation here. So that's our norms manager. That's part of the tool. And again, that allows anybody, even if they don't have a hard dollar license, to go in and manage the norms themselves. Okay, now the rubber really meets the road here in the norms browser. So this is the 3rd component of the STO norms database offering, and really this is the most important. This is the part where we're going to access that norms data from inside the hard dollar estimates. And that's going to allow us to bring cost items into the estimate and bring in the man-hours, bring in the relevant assemblies, whether they're the primary assembly or the support assembly. Okay, so let's take a look at how that works. So I'm just going to go over into hard dollar. And what I've done here is I've just opened up a project called STO2. So this is an example project. If we look at this project and the tree over on the left, in our cost breakdown structure, we'll get a good idea of how this is structured. This is fairly typical, where as we look at that shutdown of this plant 21, there's a few different sort of major things we're working on here. We're working on this vacuum tower, this exchanger. As we open those up, you see how this project is organized. We've broken it into pre-shutdown activities, activities during the shutdown, and then activities after the shutdown. Okay, so if we go in and look at our shutdown activities, you see the various tasks that we're looking to perform here. If I click on that shutdown, my estimate over on the right is going to be filtered to just those shutdown tasks. Okay, and often what we find is customers have a standard work breakdown structure or standard cost breakdown structure. Maybe it's organized by equipment, maybe it's organized by discipline. Okay, but that really becomes a template. And then inside that template, then the question is, well, on this job, do we have to do any pressure washing? Okay, on this job, what are we doing in terms of the all these different activities, cleaning out the towers, etc. Okay, so if we're starting with a template, we may or may not use all these items. But you can see here I've got some numbers in for most of these things. Let's go find some items that are in need of some estimating data here that we're going to pull in from the norms. Okay, so let's go, in fact, the last thing I looked at here, which the system conveniently remembers for me, I'm going to go find an insulation item. Okay, so I just start typing insulation, and it takes me to the first one. Let's go to the next one here. So here's an item, install insulation. Okay, there's nothing in there right now. You see there's no man hours. Okay, this is where I can go in and use my norms database to fill in the blanks essentially for this activity, right? If I know I need to install some insulation, but I'm not sure, what crews am I going to need, how long is it going to take, this is where I'm going to go into data source, and I'm going to go in and add subordinates on that line item from my norms data. Okay, now take a look at some of the other choices in this menu. First of all, we have Richardson's, we have RS Means. These are other third-party cost libraries that are available through Hard Dollar. You also have the ability to take our norms database, the standard norms database, and as we talked about, customize it and make it your own, right? And label that with your name, whatever your organization name is. So instead of using the generic norms database that we have out of the box, you can customize it and show your company name on the menu there. Okay, let's go into the general norms database here. Now, notice when I came in here that it searched for a couple things for me. So in this norms browser now, it's looking at, first of all, what's the site? So when I set up this project, I specified that this project, this is something you're going to do in job properties. Remember those locations we looked at in the database? We said we have 3 locations out of the box. You might have 5, 10, 20 different locations in which you have plants and you do work. Okay, so the norms browser reads that and knows that, hey, this estimate is relevant to location 1. Okay, so those are the norms that we're going to be working with. At this point now, I can go into these drop downs and find what I'm looking for. And we'll kind of do this slowly so you can see what's in these lists. Okay, but the first thing we're going to search on is sort of the trade or discipline. Right? What kind of stuff are we looking for? Are we looking for welding? Are we looking for hydroblasting? You can see the different choices we have in here at a high level. Painting, typical maintenance, shutdown, turnaround type disciplines that are involved. The way this works is I make a choice here. If I say I know we're looking for insulation, but right now let's say we're looking for something in the mechanical section. As we go in here now we've got a list of equipment, right, that we can choose from that's relevant to what I've already chosen on the left. Okay, if I choose something different over here, maybe control valves, okay, now when I go into my equipment list, it's a much smaller list, right? It's relevant to whatever I've already chosen for my trade. Okay, and that'll happen as we move across this list and get all the way down to the component level. Let's go ahead and choose insulation. Okay, so now in my equipment drop-down list, you see, here's the typical things to which we're going to be applying insulation. Okay, is it hot pipe? Is it cold pipe? Stainless steel, etc. Okay, let's just choose. We'll assume the pipe is going to be cold at this point. Now we can come in here, and because we've already made these choices, we're really drilling down to, well, here's really the lowest level that we can look at until we start thinking about sizes and diameters and things like that. Okay, so now we're presented with these different thicknesses for the insulation. Okay, if we were looking at pipe welding, these choices over here would be diameters and thicknesses of pipe. Okay? Since we're looking at insulation, the main parameter here is what's the thickness of the insulation. Okay, so let's say we're looking for 2-inch thick. We open that up. Now we can further refine it and say, well, I know am I insulating the pipe itself, or am I working on the ends or the T's, etc. Let's just take all of these. And what you're going to see on the right now is a list of all those different options. Right? So within that 2-inch thick insulation section, now the question is, well, are we putting that insulation over a 10-inch pipe, or are we putting it over a 24-inch pipe? Obviously, it's going to take more man-hours to put that insulation on a 24-inch pipe than a 10-inch pipe. Okay, we can choose as many different norms as we want at this point, just with a checkbox. You can see the man-hours per unit, or in this case, man-hours per foot, that are listed over there. So we'll go ahead and add that down to the bottom. Okay, and I could go now and choose. Maybe I also need some, 2.5-inch thick. All right, so I can drill into there. Choose the same 14-inch. Maybe it's a different section of the pipe. We bring that in. So now we've got 2 different man-hour norms that we've searched on, and they're ready to be added into the estimate. Okay, a couple other options before we add them into the estimate. At this point, we can put in the quantity. Okay, so if we know that we have 100 feet of that one at the 2-inch, and then we have another maybe 50 feet at the 2.5-inch thick, we can just put in those quantities right there. Okay, we can put in a difficulty factor here. Okay, so this can bump the norms up or down based on if we feel like maybe there's special conditions going on this job that we want to bump those man-hours up or down. We can also put an adjustment factor in. And if we put an adjustment factor in, it's going to force us to justify as a note, why did we do that? Okay, so essentially if we're doing anything outside the values that come from the norms database, if we want to use a different value and adjust those in any way, it's going to force us to put a note in there to document why we did that. Okay, good disciplined process for estimating, right? Now at this point, we can choose, do we also want to bring in the support assembly, okay, or not? So if we uncheck those, then we're going to bring in just the primary assembly. Okay, if it's checked, we're going to bring in the primary assembly and the support assembly. Okay, and now you can see over here, based on these quantities, there's our total man-hours that we're expecting for both of those tasks. Okay, if I click Apply, one of the nice things about this is that it pulls those items into the estimate, but it leaves me in my browser, so I can actually move on and leave this browser open. Now I can switch back and forth between my estimate and this norms browser, so I don't have to go back into the menu to launch that browser. Okay, so if we go back into the estimate, now we can see back where we started from, that install insulation has 2 subordinate items underneath it, right? 2 line items for those 2 different thicknesses of insulation. And if we open those up, you can see there's man-hours. There's basically a 3-man crew doing that work, and there's costs in there. Those costs are going to be based on the customer-specific labor rates. Okay, so our expectation is the customers are going to go in. Individual customers will go in and put in their labor rates. So if we open up these assemblies, you can see there the primary assembly and the secondary assembly that were added in here. Each of those are further broken down into the various resources that are involved in that, right? So this 2-man insulator assembly, there's an insulator labor. We've got 2 of those at a unit cost of $25 per hour. Okay, so if customer X pays $30 an hour, all we got to do is define those rates one time. The norms are going to use whatever those rates are. Okay, so it's very easy to customize those labor classifications and the rates. Okay, so if we wanted to now, maybe we want to go to another item. Maybe I know there was a dollar plate in here that we hadn't figured out yet how we're going to do that. So if we go search on that, and let's go find at that item. Oops, maybe it was already up at the top. Let's add a new item. Okay, so if we don't see that, we don't see an item we're looking for, which is just hard dollar, functionality here. I'm just going to add a new item. Maybe we're removing a dollar plate. Right, so we have an item in there that we've just added in. We know that's part of the scope, but we don't know what the man hours are yet. We don't know what the assemblies are going to be. So I can highlight that item. I've already got my norms database browser open. Okay, so now we could come back in here. If I wanted to just search for dollar plates, I could type it right in here in the search box. Okay, or we could come in here and drill through it, right? In this case, it's a mechanical item. Let's say it's on the heat exchanger. Here's all the different components that we're typically going to find in a heat exchanger. Okay, there's the dollar plate. We want to remove it. Okay, so now the question is, what exactly are we removing here? So we're removing a dollar plate. What's the size? What's the spec? Okay, so if it's a 16-inch, we'll choose that. Add that in. Okay, these two I've already used, so we can remove those. Now I'm just looking at my dollar plate. That's the only one I want. And maybe there's maybe there's 3 of those that we need to remove. Okay, 4.7 man hours, just that easy. Now we've added that item into the estimate. Right there, we've got the cost in there. Okay, so what we've got here, just in summary, is a very fast and effective way to get detailed estimates done for shutdown, turnaround, maintenance projects in a highly flexible, highly customizable way. We can leverage these industry standard norms, but we can also customize them to reflect the way we work, the language that we use, the terms that we use, and really create a very fast and effective estimating process just by picking the items we need out of that norms browser.